Yes.
So then their second point on this list is more opportunities for people in poverty. They feel that, by them coming up with this tax plan, that people in poverty are going to be able to lift themselves out and move up the economic ladder, which is something that has really not happened in almost, 2 decades?
And that's
Things have
because of
been
wage
stagnant?
growth.
Okay.
There's nothing in here that talks about wage growth. There's nothing in here that talks about how people are going to raise themselves up from poverty. I'm curious. That's a very wonderful and nice talking point. But where?
Well, I saw there was one company. So a few weeks ago, General Motors gave bonuses, and I think that's a word that's almost foreign now. They gave
Absolutely.
bonuses to hourly employees.
Absolutely.
And some
and
of
it was
those
tied to the returns of the company.
right, and it was almost, in some cases up to $12,000. So when I look at this more opportunities, I'm thinking, well, that in some cases is a lifestyle change,
It is.
depending on the amount, and that's
Did
something
that come about because the government changed taxation? Did that come about because of the new administration?
No, that was profits.
That was profits. That was because they
profits.
had more profits. And the underlying assumption that simpler is better, I think, is a fallacy.
Okay.
We live in a complex world. You know what? A bike is simpler than a car. I'd rather have a car. A car achieves what I need it to achieve. I don't care if it's simple or complex. I want it to achieve what it needs to achieve. Saying that we need something simpler goes against how the world functions.
Okay.
It would be much simpler if corporations paid everyone just a wage. Do you see executives just getting W-2s? No.
No.
They have stock options, stock warrants. They have deferred compensation plans. They have all kind of other things that are complicated.
Right.
The example you just gave with General Motors, there was a complicated calculation on how am I going to give the hourly workers a bonus. They did a complicated calculation.
Even if they were to do it in a 401k and a safe harbor plan, that's
They
still kind of
figured it
it's still a
out.
calculation.
Yes.
So what do you think about the third point in this 10-point tax plan has to do with more savings, and that comes about with reducing taxation from investment income.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that that's great, but the reality is
The reality is far different from that.
Yeah, who is this really impacting?
It really impacts the top 10% of Americans because who has investments? People who are not living paycheck to paycheck have investments. 90% of taxpayers do not have investments outside of their 401k.
Yeah, and I was
plan.
going to say now that these investments that the savings or tax savings they're on are non-qualified. So if you were to just open up a brokerage account and put money into it and let that amass, that's where your capital gains taxation is going to go down. The majority of Americans have most of their money
And it's tax-deferred account.
tax-deferred.
If they're invested in the market at all, and it's not just the majority of the Americans, it is the vast majority
Okay.
of Americans. Like I said, 90% of Americans, if they are invested in the stock market, it is in their type of retirement account.
Right.
Changing investment vehicles, which is what this plan talks about, making savings simpler, is not addressing the problem. People don't save not because they don't understand the options that are out there. People do not save because they don't have any disposable income. We have not had any wage increase, any real wage increase in over 20 years.
Okay, so for instance, if we talk about the tax code and simplifying the tax code, I mean, who doesn't want the tax code to be simplified? I mean, you just said that no, we don't need that, but if people aren't paying as much in taxes, won't that increase wages?
Though the people you're talking about not paying much in taxes, there's nothing about that fact that changes with this current proposal.
Okay.
The things that they're talking about changing for taxes, reducing the tax rate. 90% of Americans pay less than 25% anyway.
Okay.
The top tax rate, there's very few people who pay that. The complexity in the tax code are with people who have complex situations. They have real estate. They have stock options. They have multiple types of income coming in different ways. The simplification they're talking about is eliminating AMT. Less than 5% of Americans pay AMT.
Okay.
The simplification they're talking about is getting rid of some of the rollbacks that higher income people do. Frankly, every would be an extreme example. 99.9% of everything listed here impacts less than 5% of the U.S. population.
So
AMT
in
the entire taxpayer population,
Okay.
less than 5% are impacted.
Okay.
And when you talk to professionals in this arena, we talk about it as if it's very common because it's not common among our tax or of our base.
Right.
A typical CPA's client is not a typical taxpayer.
Okay.
We only represent maybe 15-20% of Americans. They're the ones who have CPAs, financial planners, lawyers, tax attorneys. So we see it all the time because that's our client base.
Right.
That's not the taxpayer base. Because if you think about it, we represent, 20% of people have to use a CPA or some professional or something to do it. It's a lot for us. That's still several million people. It's plenty of work for us. But
Right.
that's not the American taxpayer.
So most people can get by with.
They don't. The complexity that they're worried about is the earned income credit. Why is it so difficult for them to get there? There's
Right.
nothing in there about this. They talk about AMT. 5% of the population pays AMT. Estate tax. There were 10,000 estate tax returns
So
filed.
now you're jumping ahead
Oh, sorry.
to the different points.
Yeah.
Now you're jumping ahead.
Well,
So,
it's just, simplification of the tax code is a fallacy in the way that this proposal is written.
okay.
Because the simplification they're talking about does not impact the far majority of taxpayers. Everything they're talking about changing doesn't impact the normal person.
Right.
The second thing is, you can file it on one form. Filing it on one form, everyone
I think they
uses
said a napkin.
yeah, which is great. But that has nothing
For
to
a
do with the
postcard.
supporting documentations to
Right.
get that number on there.
Right.
There's one line for income, but you still have to get all of your W-2s, all your 1099s. That part doesn't change.
Okay. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the other points in the Republican 10-point tax plan that they're proposing, and we'll be back right after this.
Thank you.